friends, welcome back to Amy Bakes. I'm Amy, and today we're going to make a delicious recipe using some of our sourdough discard. Today we're going to make a chocolate cobbler using sourdough discard. An original recipe credit on this one goes to amybakesbread.com. Not this Amy, but a different Amy. And y'all really should go check out her site. She's got some amazing recipes there. But this one is great for using up your extra sourdough discard. If you don't have discard, that's okay. We've got to work around that too. But this one is delicious and just perfect in time for Valentine's Day for that chocolate lover in your life. So let's go over our ingredients and supplies. For our ingredients today, we are going to need about 1/4 cup of unsalted butter. We're going to need 170 grams or 3/4 cups of sugar, 20 grams or about 3 tablespoons of cocoa, 115 grams of all-purpose flour, or about 3/4 of a cup. We're going to need about 2 teaspoons of baking powder, not soda. We're going to need a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. We're also going to need a little bit of vanilla, about a teaspoon's worth, 100 grams of sourdough discard, and about 1/2 cup of semi-sweet chocolate chip cookies. And I forgot to get my milk. We're going to need 120 grams of whole milk. We will also need an additional 30 grams or 1/4 cup of cocoa powder and an additional 1 cup of sugar and about 1.5 cups of boiling water. For supplies, this one is going to be very basic. You're going to need a couple of small bowls, an 8x8 pan, a measuring cup, spoon, measuring spoon, and we're going to weigh our ingredients. So instead of using measuring cups, we're going to use the scale. First thing we're going to do is preheat our oven to 350. And then we're going to prepare the dish. And to do that, you're going to take 1/2 stick of butter. And you're going to put that in your baking dish to melt. So while the oven is preheating, your butter will melt. And you're just going to set that in the oven. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to put in 170 grams of sugar, which is about 3/4 of a cup. But like I said, I'm going to weigh it. When you weigh, you get a more accurate measurement than just when you're using measuring cups. So we're looking for 170. There we go. So I've got that. Now what I'm going to do before I add my next ingredient is I'm going to go ahead and zero out my scale. Okay, so that was 170. Of that, I'm going to need about 20 grams of cocoa powder. I'm going to mix in about 20 grams of cocoa powder. Okay, almost. Perfect. All right, I'm going to clear out my scale again, and now we are looking for 115 grams of all-purpose flour. Almost. Okay, 115. Now we need 8 grams of baking powder. Well, that went up to 116, but that's okay. We need 8 grams of baking powder, or about 2 teaspoons. Be sure you're using baking powder and not baking soda. There we go, 8 grams. And next, about 3 grams of salt, which is about 1/2 teaspoon. Let me go ahead and clear that out again. Perfect. Now we're going to give that a good stir. And then in another small bowl, we're going to go ahead and measure out our wet ingredients. So I've got my bowl on my scale, and I'm going to zero it out. And now we are going to add, let's see, we're going to add our sourdough, our milk, and our vanilla. So let's get our discard. And we are going to need 100 grams of sourdough discard. So if you don't have sourdough discard, you can do equal parts of flour and water. So if we need 100 grams, you would do 50 grams of flour, 50 grams of water. Now the benefit to this sourdough discard is, one, you're not wasting because you're using the leftover, the discard from when you feed every day. But it's also got that little bit of tangy flavor. There we go. You won't have that if you just mix up fresh flour and water. But that's okay. In a recipe like this, you don't want too tangy of a flavor. And this one doesn't have that overpowering sourdough flavor. It's got so much chocolate, it's much more sweet than it is tangy. But if you do have discard, this is a great recipe to use it. If you don't, you don't have to make any sourdough just to make this recipe. Okay, our next step is going to be 4 grams of vanilla. That's about a teaspoon's worth. So let's see how close we are. That's a whole lot more than a teaspoon. There we go. All right, we're going to zero that out, and then we are going to do 120 grams of milk. And then once we get this measured up, we're going to stir this all together and then combine the two. It's a little over, but that's okay. Now, we're going to stir this all up. And then we're going to combine the two. Mix this in, and then add our chocolate chips. I've got that mixed in really well, and back on my scale and zeroed out once again, and we're going to add to that 85 grams of semi-sweet chocolate chips. And that's about a half a cup's worth. So my daughter informed me we could add a little bit more if we wanted to. There we go. We'll just do an even 100. And now we're going to gently fold those chocolate chips in and prepare the topping. We've got our chocolate chips gently folded in. And now we're just going to set the cobbler mix to the side and wait on the oven. And while we're doing that, I've went ahead and washed this bowl because we're going to use it again. And for this, we are going to need some cocoa. We're going to need about 30 grams of cocoa. And then we're going to need 200 grams of sugar. All right, so we're going to put our cocoa in here. And while we're doing this, you also want to get some water boiling, because we're going to add boiling water to this mixture. That's 30 grams. I'm going to go ahead and turn the kettle on while we're doing that. So we got 30 grams of that, and then 200 grams of sugar, about a cup's worth. Hopefully I've got enough in here. Just enough. There we go. All right, now we're just going to mix this up, and we're going to wait for our water to boil. Very carefully take your buttered pan out. It's going to splatter, so be careful. And now what we're going to do, we're still waiting on our water to finish boiling, but now what we're going to do is very carefully, I'm going to kind of rotate this pan around. There we go. Kind of butter that around. Now we're going to add our cobbler mixture to our pan. Again, be very careful. And then we're going to spread this around nice and even. There we go. And if you want to, You can kind of sprinkle a few extra chocolate chips across the top. That's up to you. Do we want to do that? Okay, there we go. I think we're good with the chocolate chips because we added some extra. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pour our cocoa and sugar mixture, and we're just going to layer this across the top. We're going to try to cover the entire cobbler, and then once we get our water, it's about to start boiling, then we're going to pour that on the top. And that sounds a little weird, and it feels a little weird, to be honest. When you're doing it, you're thinking, okay, this is going to turn out really odd, but trust the process here. It's really good. It seems weird, but just trust the process. Just make sure you cover that. Get up on those sides. Okay, that's a little warm. We're going to use 1.5 cups now of boiling water. And then, there we go. Then we're just going to pour this over the entire cobbler. And there we go. And now we're going to put our glove back on because this pan is super hot. And now we're going to put this in the oven, and we are going to bake this at 350 for 30 to 35 minutes. Carefully, so that you don't spill it or splash it. There we go. Okay, it has been 30 minutes, and what we're looking for is you want to bake this until the top is puffy and set. And that looks pretty good. It's kind of firm to the touch. You do not want to do a toothpick test on something like this where you poke the toothpick in and pull it out, you know, and check to see if it's dry, because it's ooey and gooey in there and it's not going to be dry. So this looks perfect. So that's it. You're going to let this sit for about 5 to 10 minutes. You want to serve it warm, and probably serve it also with a scoop of ice cream. So I hope you give this one a try. It is so super easy, and you're going to be shocked at how delicious this is. If you give this one a try, be sure to leave me a comment and let me know what you think about it.